Okay, John chapter 8, Jesus is back at the temple and a crowd begins to gather and he sits down to teach them. But while he's teaching, the Pharisees bring this woman who had committed adultery. They bring him to her, or bring her to Jesus, and they say, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" Okay, so they were trying to trap him. And they kept demanding an answer, and so he stood up and he said this. All right, this is Jesus speaking. "Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Now you can read it for yourself, but none of them end up doing it. And he's the only one standing there with her now. And he says, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" And she said, "No." And then Jesus said to her, "I don't condemn you either. Go and sin no more." Now real quick, just notice that he said, "I don't condemn you," but he's also not saying that it's okay to sin. So he wants to bring life, but life means that you're free from this, this sin that brings such death into your life. And so he says, "I'm not going to condemn you, but I want to set you free to live in the light and to not sin anymore." And then he turns it into a teaching. Verse 12, he spoke to the people and he said, "I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life." See, so he's not trying to say that God doesn't care how we live. He's just trying to say there's a new way to be righteous. We'll see what that is. We've already seen it. It's through believing in him and trusting in him. And then that changes our lives because it brings light into our life and we don't have to walk in darkness anymore. Okay? So there's some more teaching there, and we see some really good sort of popular verses. Maybe you've heard some of these verses before. He says in verse 24, still speaking to the people, "That is why I said that you will die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am who I claim to be, you will die in your sins." And they're trying to grasp his teaching and understand it. And it says in verse 31, Jesus said to the ones who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." So notice, he's not saying that, oh, if you're my disciples and you just do whatever you want, you can live however you want. That's not the message of Jesus. The message of Jesus is when you meet him, he changes your life, and then you can go and sin no more because the truth sets you free. He says in verse 36, "So if the Son sets you free, you are truly free." Again, just think about that woman at the beginning of the chapter. She was set free, and she was truly free if she went and sinned no more because of what Jesus was doing. One more thing at the bottom of this chapter is really important passage as far as understanding who Jesus is and the nature of Jesus and the idea of the Trinity. He says at the bottom of this teaching, "Your father Abraham rejoiced as he looked forward to my coming. He saw it and was glad." And the people said, "Well, wait a second, you aren't even 50 years old. How can you say you have seen Abraham?" And Jesus said this, "I tell you the truth, before Abraham was even born, I am." And now that phrase "I am" comes from Exodus when God introduced himself to Moses. He called himself "I am." And so what Jesus is doing here is he's claiming to be not just a prophet, not just a great teacher, not just the Son of God, but he's claiming to be God himself. And they didn't like that idea, but they're still trying to understand who Jesus is. And so keep reading a chapter a day and you'll understand more and more all about who Jesus is and what it means for your life.